All right, YouTube, you've probably seen that the Pope sees fit to weigh in upon the U.S. campaign for the presidency. Rush Limbaugh has been drawn in, Rubio got drawn in, Jeb got drawn in. Oddly enough, the Republicans running against Donald Trump because of the nature of the issue have been forced to come to his defense, which is hilarious because they've had nothing but negative things to say about him until now, and now in order to not look soft on border defense, they have to rush to his defense. It'll be interesting to see how Ted Cruz weighs in, but I have to assume that he's going for the evangelical vote. But do Protestants really like the Catholic Church? I'm gonna guess no. In fact, this could secure the race in South Carolina for Donald Trump. But let's just get past that and talk about what was said and my reaction to it. Because I think you all know how I feel about organized religion. I don't like neoconservatism. I don't like warmongering. I'm not anti-immigrant. But organized religion is a cancer. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about some Jewish synagogue or an Islamic cleric or a megachurch pastor or the Pope. Catholicism, if you take it as a sectarian movement, as the largest single sectarian movement upon the face of the earth, it's also responsible for hundreds of millions of deaths. Most of its history was filled with book burnings and witch burnings and pogroms and all sorts of horrific things that you could possibly think of. That's the Catholic Church, specifically the Romanized Christians after the usurpation of the Christian cult by Constantine, making his own dogma, which I don't know why they bother to call it the canonical scriptures, since it's all fucking over the place as far as its ideology. That's why it contradicts itself so often. The teachings of Christ are not actually in Paul's letters. They're certainly not in the Old Testament either. But the Pope essentially indicated a belief that a person was not a true Christian if they thought only about building walls and not about building bridges. Now, I like to think that Donald Trump thinks that building the occasional bridge is probably a good way to make money as well, and that's really what his campaign boils down to. But let's not mince words here. The Pope may appear more progressive than his predecessor, that is Pope Ratzinger, who was a Nazi youth, an extreme hardliner, brought back indulgences, was generally not particularly well received. He was the person who was in charge of the sex abuse allegations in the 90s when the worst of that shit was going on. This is a pope who has done absolutely nothing to protect children beyond what Ratzinger did. He's done nothing really to reform the message of the Catholic Church because he's clinging to the same antiquated scripture. The fact that he's more social media savvy does not mean that the Catholic Church has moved fundamentally beyond the medieval era. And I'll tell you why. The Pope is a globalist. The Pope doesn't like the concept of strong borders. When people's national identity breaks down, the world looks more like it did during the Dark Ages when Catholic identity becomes a substitute for national identity. Now, do I drag this towards the realm of conspiracy theory of, Whore of Babylon Catholic Church, one world order, one world religion, everyone will be forced to kneel before the Pope? No, Catholicism is no longer quite as powerful a force as it was in the past. It's slowly beginning to wane in its growth. A lot of the new Catholics in the world, they're not even in the Americas, they're in Africa, believe it or not. The Catholics are fighting with the Muslims over the continent of Africa, which is very funny, and that's where most of the growth is occurring. And they're not extracting as much tribute from those nations as they do from the developed world because, of course, there's less money for people to actually donate. But the Catholic Church is just a corporate entity at this point. It's a political corporate entity, an imperialist movement that seeks, like any other mainstream religion, to rule as much as possible. They don't care about ruling the world. They want as many people as possible on board, and they'll change their message or seem to change their message in order to appeal to new groups of people, in order to get money and power. That's really what it's about. They have nothing in common with the biblical Jesus told about in the Gospels. If you look at what he said there, supposedly, assuming you believe such a being existed in the first place, what's he fucking saying? He essentially sounds like an anarchist or something. He's saying, sell everything you own, give it to the poor. Well, the Catholic Church doesn't do that. I'm sorry. If you look at the story, the metaphor, the parable that Jesus gives regarding the widow's miter. That is, an old woman comes in. They're collecting money for the poor, for the Christian body. Judas was in charge of the money, which was funny. Widow comes in, puts 2 copper coins, 2 miters or 2 pence or whatever you'd like to term, 2 pennies, a very small sum into the collective pot for the poor. Meanwhile, there are all of these rich people coming in and taking basically, sacks of silver and gold and donating it to the poor. And Jesus tells his disciples in this parable that the widow has given more than they have. Yes, she's given less as an absolute total, but she gave everything she fucking had. These people, they're already rich. They're a bag of gold means nothing to them. It's a small proportion of what they have. I see in this a similarity to the Catholic Church. The Catholics are so wont to talk about, oh, look at all these charities the Catholic Church has set up. Look at all the money they gave. They gave to these starving orphans, and they set up this home for the orphans, and this group for the poor, and here's a charity for the wounded, and here's one for the mentally ill. Other than the ones that Mother Teresa used to chain to their beds to die and deny medicine to, telling them just to pray. Because it's better to die virtuous than to live in sin. So, no fucking medicine for the mentally ill under Mother Teresa, who is beloved of Reagan. I'm sure that this Pope wouldn't have had a problem with him. Because they like to, if Trump got elected, the Pope would be the first person to come forward and say, oh, you want to be best friends? You want to donate some more money to the Roman Catholic fucking Church? It'd be the first thing to happen. They talk about all of these monetary gifts and foundations and orders that they set up to help the orphans or the wounded children or some other group of people. But it's a tiny proportion of what they make. How do they make it? A lot of that money that they make comes from a bunch of poor people giving them part of their welfare check in the first place. Some little old lady on disability decides to go and tithe to the Catholic Church. They solicit those funds from the poor, then they redisperse a proportion of that money to other poor people, and they call it generosity. Meanwhile, these bishops and cardinals and all these other rich hypocrites there are drinking their wine and driving their sports cars and being paid for by the church. They've got education for priests paid for by the church. These people want for nothing. Even those that are in the lower rungs of the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, who, they don't make an enormous, they're not making a fortune as priests or something like that, or as monks. They have all their needs taken care of. They never have to worry about being homeless and out on the streets. They just perform their services and they go polish the idols or do whatever it is they fucking want to do and use their talents for the benefit of the church in some way. And all they have to do is preach on Sunday and maybe, give a sermon in some other language too. I remember in Texas they had it in Catholic, English, and a Filipino mass for some reason. There must have been a minority within the minority down in southern Texas where, indeed, whites are the minority, which was, it was a culture shock for me. Not one that I, poorly received, but it was a bit of a culture shock. But that's what the Catholic Church does. They get $1 million in revenue. They spend half of that money on some foundation for the poor, and they call it generosity. Well, no, that's not generosity. That's essentially redistributionism in a Marxist sense. It's the same as the government saying, oh, well, we're giving this money to the poor. Well, where'd that money come from? It came from other taxpayers. The government didn't magically summon the money into existence and sell the shirts off of their back and sell their limousines and sell their private airplanes. John McCain's not selling his private aircraft or his 6th and 5th homes to feed the poor. He's simply voting more of the taxpayers' money to do the same thing. That's not generosity. It speaks to the generosity of the country as a total that they're willing to put up with such bullshit and politicians who claim that they're the ones doing something for the poor. Obama has done shit. He has done nothing for the poor. Bush did nothing for the poor. Clinton did nothing for the poor. You have to go back a long time to find a president who has instituted any sort of policy that actually helped the lower classes or the middle class within this country. The rest of them, they're all bought and sold. They're paid for by a bunch of corporations and unions and lobbyists and a bunch of rich plutocrats and people like that. In fact, Trump's the only one who's not, because he is a rich plutocrat. So, he kind of gets a pass by being one of the same donors that used to screw around with the political system. And then he openly admits it, which is also amusing. But fuck the Pope. He has no place in U.S. politics. The same people, the same Democrats, like Hillary or Sanders, they ingratiate themselves to the sort of multicultural leanings of the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church doesn't care what race you are. It wants your money. It doesn't care. It doesn't care if you're giving them $2 and you live in Nigeria, or whether you're giving them $2,000 and you live in Jersey City. They don't fucking care as long as you're paying them and going to eat their hideous little communion wafers and have a sip of grape juice every weekend. They don't fucking care. They're a globalist organization. They're a multinational corporation. That's what the Catholic Church is. It's not like the nationalists within the Orthodox Church, or the nativists within what we would consider American or English Protestant movements, or the German Lutherans or something like that. No, it's a globalist order. In a way, the most wacky conspiracy theorists like fucking Henry Macau or Alex Jones, when they talk about the Catholic Church being the whore of Babylon, they're kind of right. Now, I don't drag religion to it because I'm not a Christian. I don't believe in the end times. I don't believe in Revelation. I don't believe in the Antichrist and all this mystical mumbo-jumbo that they pull up out of their assholes and out of the asshole of their dead Jewish Messiah. I don't believe in all that bullshit. But they are a multinational corporation. Let's make no mistake. They operate in every country that they can. North Korea and maybe like Turkmenistan. Those are the nations where the Catholic Church doesn't have any presence. They have a presence basically everywhere else on earth. They get a lot of money for doing that, and then they claim, we're generous like Jesus and give to the poor. No, you don't. You don't generate any money on your own, other than some of your business entities, which are held locally and sort of, in turn, the bishops or cardinals or whatever that decided to locally invest in such things to make money, they give some of that to the church too, while ingratiating themselves. Why do you think these people are always driving around in a Porsche or something like that? Some higher up, someone in the conclave of cardinals at the Vatican. Need I remind you the hypocrisy here? And it pains me. It pains me to have to side with somebody like Rush Limbaugh on such an issue. I mean, Rush Limbaugh, he's just a bloated pill popper. But he's right. The Vatican is protected by a wall. You try to climb over the wall into the Vatican to go shake hands with the Pope when you're not expected and see what fucking happens. You'll be in some torture dungeon really quick, because a bunch of Swiss guards with machine guns will blast you right off the wall or lasso you the second that you drop to the ground inside. And they're going to wrangle you around, beat you senseless. You'll wake up in a dark cell with a bunch of people shouting at you in Italian. That's what the Pope is protected by. I don't see him housing thousands of migrants in the Vatican City. Why don't you sell off the Vatican archives that you still won't even let people with the qualifications necessary to study ancient documents from any secular university or any secular museum? Why don't you sell off the fucking Vatican archives and give the proceeds to the poor and the migrants you claim to love so much? People who aren't members of your religion, they're not paying you to come there to Europe. They're not paying you to come to the Western world. They don't even like you. They're threatening you openly, and you're so stupid that you're on board with people like Merkel that want to bring more of them into the Western world. See, here's the problem. The Pope is on board with this because he doesn't have to worry about it. He doesn't give a fuck if 99% of the population of the city of Rome becomes Islamo-fascist. He doesn't care if ISIS takes over Rome. He's surrounded by his own private army numbering in the thousands, and he can call up even more support really fucking quick. He's got the backing of the Italian state. He's got the backing of the city of Rome. He's got the backing of a large, what essentially amounts to a paramilitary group in Switzerland. He doesn't have to fucking care. He doesn't care if the whole nation descends into chaos. But he's not an American. He's from Argentina. He's not a citizen of the United States. Now, how funny is it this? The same Democrats, the same partisans generally, or liberals, which may or may not be even in the Democratic Party. You know, think of some Green Party politicians or something, or people from some of the liberal parties in Europe. These same people that sort of, they fawn over Catholicism, they gleefully ignore the fact that the Catholic Church still thinks, you're a sinner if you're gay, you're a sinner if you have an abortion. Contraception, well, we're not exactly sure. That's the one thing he kind of toned it down on. He said, oh yeah, if you got a communicable disease, I guess it's okay if you use a condom. Other than that, no, it's not. Pornography should be banned. Any heresy should be banned. Come on, folks. This is still a medieval multinational organization. It's not a progressive group. It's an extremely morally conservative, reactionary religious front. And yet it ingratiates itself to the left wing here in the United States. I don't quite understand it. The only way you can understand is this. The Democrats aren't as multicultural and far left as you may think. They pretend to be because they want voting and money and power. And that's exactly why the Pope's doing it. The Pope is hoping that these people will be new converts, or that the nations will begin to degrade and people will become more religious because they'll be, if people are fat and sassy, have enough money, and they have their cars, and they have their music, and they have freedom, generally speaking, they're not interested in religion. They have no need to pray to the retarded Catholic God. And that's exactly what it is. The Catholic God is just a sad tyrant up in the sky that people pray to when they're in time of need, specifically because the Catholic Church has put them in that position. That's what it's done throughout history. Look at the medieval era. Again, Catholic Church orders all these people to fight, constantly shifting borders. It was great for the Catholic Church. They made an empire out of it for a while, the Holy Roman Empire. People were so astonished at the level of misery and violence, they were willing to amalgamate into a Catholic state. They're like, at least there'll be some fucking stability within these borders for a while. And there was. There was for a while. I mean, it was a far cry from the Roman Empire in the pagan days, but hey, at least we've got it's not non-stop border shifting and cultural conflict constantly because we got one religion, one basic, proto-European culture, so things are generally okay. We speak different languages, but we worship the same God. We all listen to the Catholic Mass, so things are just peachy. We don't care if we have to pay, 90% of what we're making to the Catholic Church or to some lord or king. That's how the Catholic Church operates. It's retarded for the Pope to drag his balls through this argument. It's completely fucking moronic. And also, this just shows how fallible the Pope is, that he doesn't understand what is going on here in the United States politically right now. Donald Trump does not care if the Pope comes out and criticizes him. Yeah, the Pope's more popular than Donald Trump. Who cares? The people supporting Donald Trump don't really like establishment figures. Most of them, they're not Catholics. You think that he's got the Catholic vote sewn up, and you think that the Catholics that are thinking of voting for him care what the Pope has to say? I'm sorry, folks. You may go to a Catholic country in the Hispanic world, South America, or parts of Africa, or someplace like that. And people say, yeah, we respect what the Pope has to say. You come here, they probably don't even know the Pope's name, most of them. Most of the self-professed Catholics, they probably don't even know his name. They don't even know who he was before he was Pope Benedict. They don't know his actual name. They don't know it because they don't fucking care. They probably don't even go to church every week. Catholicism is a dying force within the United States. And good fucking riddance. I hope that the Protestant movements follow it. I hope that Islam and Judaism and all these groups follow it back into the Dark Ages where it belongs and go somewhere else. Because here in this country, we were meant to have secular rules. Now, I find it funny. Right now, it's the Democrats that are constantly ranting about separation of church and state, which is true. I agree with you. They're the ones ranting about how great the Pope is, how great his words are, how horrible these Republicans are. Oh, these Americans that we disagree with should just sit down and fucking shut up. But this dude from Argentina living in Italy, living in the Vatican City, oh, his words are acceptable political discourse within the United States. No, they're fucking not. They're not acceptable at all. He's not from the United States. He's not a citizen of the United States. He represents a theocratic microstate. You people are always talking about how bad theocracy is, yet when it comes to the Pope, because he says one or two things that you happen to like, or criticizes one or two people you happen to dislike, all of a sudden you're riding his dick. I don't understand. And the Republicans that are seen as sort of the backwards, the evangelical, overtly Jesus-worshipping party, are the ones criticizing him, coming to the aid of Donald Trump. I mean, isn't this fucking hilarious? Aren't you having a great time with this election? This is so much better than it was Romney versus Obama. They couldn't even figure out what to disagree on. They were just making little side swipes at each other. You know, they agreed on everything. They were backed by the same people. It was impossible to tell who was, if you closed your eyes during a Romney-Obama debate, you didn't even know who was talking half the time. Unless the moderator asked them a question and actually mentioned their name, you had no clue because it sounded so similar, right? Well, this time around, we've got something different. Sanders is a bit different. Rand was, until he dropped out, unfortunately, different. Trump's certainly different. The libertarian movement's still growing. By the way, it's a big fat lie that the Republicans and the Democrats tell when they say, oh, the decline of libertarianism. Sorry, folks, its vote share increased last time around. It's going to increase this time around. It doesn't even matter if Trump gets the nomination. He'll probably win, but no, the libertarian vote share is not going to magically go down because one of the two parties has some mild reform going on. No, the Pope is just a complete retard. Never forget, folks, this is the head of an organized, theocratic, multinational movement. A globalist corporation, which is exactly what it is. It is a money-making, tax-exempt, in most nations, scheme. That's all the Catholic Church is. They're not generous. They're not progressive. They're not even traditionalists, as some on the right would claim. Oh, well, yeah, the Catholic Church is pretty good. They hold to tradition. No, they don't. They don't give a fuck about your traditions. They don't care who legislates your nation. They don't care if they run it into the ground. As long as they get their extracted tribute from your people, they do not care what legislation is passed. They don't care if it's a far-left government close to communism or whether it's a far-right government very close to like some reactionary monarchist movement or something like that. They don't care if you hate black people. They don't care if you're a racist. They don't care if you're multiculturalist. They don't care if you're rich or poor. They're very inclusive. See, the only problem is that inclusivity that they carry, they just want money from you. That's the Catholic Church and what it does in the world. I have absolutely no fucking respect for this retard Pope at all. I didn't respect Ratzinger. Pope John Paul was a loser. They're all losers. It's an organized religion. Why the hell are the Democrats are fixated on the concept of separation in church and state anytime Donald Trump or Ted Cruz is speaking? So why all of a sudden are they saying, oh, we love the Pope so much? Fuck the Pope. Who gives a fuck about the moron? I hope he keels over and dies. I hope somebody throws him out of the fourth-story window of his palace at the Vatican. He's a retard. He's protected by a wall and dudes with machine guns. He doesn't have to worry about illegal immigration into his microstate. Unless somebody tunnels into the sewers underneath it, gets into the archives and steals the Necromancer or something like that. Some dark occult book that he's been cloistering away because it disproves Christianity, which they probably do have books like that in the Vatican archives. Nobody outside the Vatican has ever seen them, so, or at least in the last 3 or 4 centuries. Maybe Napoleon visited the archives and said, let me in or I'll blow your head off. Since then, no, nothing. Come on. Please, the Pope. Who gives a rat's ass what the Pope fucking says? I sure as hell don't. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a right-winger. I'm certainly not a Christian. I'm certainly not a Protestant. But I'm not going to support this retarded theocrat and his organized religious cult in its bid to extract as much money and create as much misery as it can in the world. Don't fucking kid me about your stupid generosity when all of the money that you dole out to people comes from other poor people largely, or rich donors that want some political favor from the Catholic Church. I have a feeling maybe they asked Trump for money. They said, oh, we'll say good things about you if you sign a check over to this orphans fund so that we can take credit for it and look good because we can have 100 more smiling faces of paraplegic children that we gave like hip implants or something for. And Trump probably said no, and that's why the Pope came out and said that. You think it's spur of the moment? You think the Pope just all of a sudden said, hey, I think I'll weigh in on the U.S. race? No, it was prompted by something. They probably asked Trump for money to prevent them from, it was sort of a mafioso deal. This idiot who's running the Catholic Church, basically a mafioso anyway. We all know it. In his past, a little bit strange. Basically, oh, if you give us money, we'll be your friend. If you don't, maybe we'll break your kneecaps. Of course, they can't break his kneecaps, but they can say bad things about him to the media and try to sway the voters. Well, I don't care what somebody outside of the United States says regarding our political race. I don't fucking care. You're not voting. You have nothing to do. You're a theocrat. You're running a religious microstate. You have nothing to do with our government, never should, and never have and never will. Go fuck yourself. That's about all. Peace out.